Star Wars The Last Jedi is the most divisive Star Wars film since the last Star Wars film. And then in hindsight, also the Star Wars film before that. Probably even more so. You know, people are banging on about whether it's the best or worst film ever made, when at the end of the day, well, you know, it is or it isn't. Whatever you want to think is fine. Who cares? What I want to look at here, though, is everything from The Last Jedi that didn't make the final cut, based on the concept art, interviews, deleted scenes, and the little we know about George Lucas's original ideas. Now, if that's all you're interested in, the George Lucas stuff, that's absolutely fine. Just skip ahead to this time code. But bearing in mind, there's a bit of a bloody run up to get there, and there's a whole lot of other amazing ideas that we didn't see. So why not give that a bloody go if you want? Alright, let's get into it. The development for the character of Luke Skywalker began with the inception of Episode 7. This was even before a director was decided upon, and Disney was still in the early planning stages. There wasn't a solid idea of how much Luke Skywalker we were going to see in 7, let alone 8, but initially he appeared quite a bit. This was though shelved, due to him pulling focus from the new main characters whenever he was on screen. But some of those early ideas, it seems, started out as early concepts for Episode 7, before Luke was pushed mostly into the next film, and then these ideas were abandoned entirely. The thinking always seemed to have been Luke Skywalker was in some kind of isolation at an ancient Jedi temple, with Rey going to find him in order to seek guidance. This is highlighted in this piece with a meditation chamber that involves lifting a really big rock around him, hinting at the growth of his Force abilities. They also toyed with the idea of evil Sith ghosts, which I assume was scrapped because the Sith aren't supposed to manifest after death, which explains their obsession with living forever. We're also able to see more from Ahch-To, which was not just a singular island because an old speeder was required to get from place to place. One moment even saw Rey park the Falcon on water and swim in closer to the temple. In fact, a lot of the images seen in the book, The Art of Star Wars, The Last Jedi, is Rey spelunking about old Jedi ruins with imagery very reminiscent of previous Star Wars films and her scavenging inside the old Star Destroyer on Jakku. We also see her confront both a Sith and Jedi at one point, perhaps in an early version of her cave vision or something else entirely. I don't know. It doesn't say. In terms of her training though, we also see her surrounded by a bunch of those Seeker droids, because you know, that's what you do in a sequel. You up the number of things from the previous film. That's what people want! Luke's X-Wing is also located in a different place than what we saw in the film, and the Jedi library was initially much more extensive than just a handful of books that apparently Luke didn't bother to read. Some pages were even sketched out, no doubt holding some of the greatest secrets from the Star Wars universe. And look, if anyone other than me wants to translate these, then you know, absolutely knock yourself out. It's probably just the Jedi Code or something. You know, just steal children, train them with laser swords, and then abandon them in a crisis. Also, if you hated Porgs, well, this was a moment seemingly just for you, because it was ever so briefly considered that one of them actually turn on the lightsaber and skewer another one through the head. I mean, we ended up seeing a Praetorian guard skewered through the head, but that is a cold comfort to the anti-Porg. The First Order also at one point or another were to arrive on Ahch-To in a land assault, which we didn't end up getting. We were also potentially at one point to see more Jedi children, the ones that Luke trained. This was abandoned though, so the film didn't feel too prequel-y. But we do also see a very young Ben Solo. Speaking of though, the Kylo Ren we got wasn't always the Kylo Ren we got. The scars and bandages went through a number of changes, with even at one point for the character to be entirely bald. The book also highlights some minor details, including the escape pod from the Falcon reading "Property of Han Solo," which is a nice little touch. Also, going back to the opening of the film, after the crawl, there was going to be a pan down, then a passing ship, and then to Finn as he's waking up from a coma. That Bacta suit also went through a number of incarnations, with the focus I think being on looking real cumbersome and dumb. And there's also some other designs for Rose and her sister's necklace, including the Rebel insignia. Speaking of Finn and Rose though, initially the whole Canto Bight sequence was to feature Finn and Poe, ending with a kiss after Poe saves Finn's life on Crate. Okay, that last bit, that's probably not true. I mean, it feels like it could be, but I still think that Disney are working their way up to their first interracial gay kiss. So, you know, just give it a few more years, baby steps. The reason though Poe was regulated to yelling at Laura Dern was because Rian Johnson realized that if you pair these two together, you could just swap all the dialogue and it wouldn't matter. It was a boring dynamic apparently. So Rose was introduced to mix things up. Also, here's a fun little fact, and something I didn't pick up on in my Easter egg video, which I'll link at the end. The ship they used to get to Canto Bight was part of this transport from episode 7. There you bloody go. Here's also an early look at the DJ character, and it seems when the character of Rose was conceived of as an idea, she was visualized as Caucasian. A similar thing actually happened with Finn and Poe in The Force Awakens. There's also a moment we didn't see that harkens back to the original film, where Finn rounds a corner only to face a whole stack of stormtroopers before realizing the armor is empty and he's in the Supremacy's laundromat. Evil BB-8, the character we all know and love and definitely remember the name of, also went through a number of designs. And jumping over to Crate, there's quite a few alternate designs for the old Rebel headquarters, one in particular being just a big old hole in the roof for ships to enter and exit. They were also conscious not to make this whole thing just another Yavin 4, and in the end, Rian Johnson just wanted a big-ass door on a big-ass rock. And that's what we got. And here's a look at some of the other ski speeder designs. This one being very Phantom Menace-esque, and here's some of those, you know, those crystal foxes. There's some, look, they were different at some point, you know, you get it. We also have some descriptions from some of the scenes from an earlier cut of the film, which came in at around 3 hours. Now, I don't know if you remember, but there were rumors from very early on that Tom Hardy would play a role in the film. This was confirmed as something that was shot and cut, with Finn recognizing him from their early training days, and Tom Hardy's character unwittingly congratulating him on his promotion. And did you want more Captain Phasma in The Last Jedi? Well, you might see some on the Blu-ray. After Finn bashes a hole in her mask, he attempts to win over some surrounding stormtroopers by saying that they can leave with him and escape Phasma's grasp. He also reveals that it was her who gave over the shield codes for Starkiller Base and is hence responsible for its destruction. And while the stormtroopers are considering their options, she guns them all down. Did you want more Canto Bite? Probably not, I'm sure. It seems like the sequence that the majority of people are just not fussed about. But hey, too bad, we're talking about it. A lot of the reshoots involved adding more creatures and a bit more of Finn pining over Rey, which Rose isn't happy about. We also get more Rose backstory, as she explains how her family was also taken by the First Order, plus that chase sequence was even longer with them crashing through a bathhouse, much to the surprise of a bunch of weird looking Star Wars aliens. Also there's concept art and even a gown and suit made for Rose and Finn that they stole to get into the casino, with Finn actually wearing his tux backwards by accident. They also rendezvous with the real codebreaker, who's actually at the casino, casing a dude he's been watching for months, called the Butcher of Bricks. However, they're all captured and thrown into casino jail, and that's where they meet DJ. Also, interestingly, the DJ role was initially going to be filled by Lando Calrissian, which would make sense, you know, he's a gambling man. However, it was thought that it didn't make sense for Lando to be the one to betray the Resistance, considering his history with them. Also, he already did that. Remember a little film called Star Wars 2? Okay, back to Arc 2. Yes, bless me. After the scene where Luke takes Rey through all the failings of the Jedi, they notice a boat approaching. Luke explains that on that boat is pirates, and that every now and then they rock up to the island to plunder and kill some of the caretakers. Rey wants to help, but Luke says, what's the point? Plus, you'll be gone soon, and you know they'll just return. She then uses a force-powered run to get there in time, in what I think is the only moment from the trailers that didn't make it into the film, and what would also be the second time since The Phantom Menace that someone did a really fast run. That would be super useful if every Jedi used it all the time. When she gets there though, she realizes that the fire she could see from a distance was just a bit of a party with some locals and R2-D2 and Chewbacca. She then returns to Luke and is all, what the hell, man? And he responds, hey, you know what? This was a lesson. The point being, I guess, that the Resistance needs someone who'll spring into action like you and not some shithouse religion. Rey starts crying and talks about how all their friends are dying and that they need the help of Luke Skywalker, and Luke realizes that he's pushed her too far, and what this basically all amounts to is another reason for her to get off the island. Right, Lucas's version. If you've skipped to here, just know that you've missed so much quality content. You wouldn't believe it. I bet there's just thousands of comments below talking about how all of that content was such of high quality. Right, so if you did want to know Lucas's plan for 7, I've got a video that's very thorough with all the current information we've been given about that, and I'll link that at the end. But what we knew about his version of 8 was that it would continue the story of Kira, who ended up becoming Rey, a young Jedi in training under the tutelage of Luke Skywalker. So anybody who thought that Rey was Disney's way of appealing to all those bloody SJWs, and Lucas, you know, he never would have done that, well, he did. He was going to do that. In fact, the character was going to be even younger than what we saw, with the next generation of heroes being aged between 8 and 16. Disney, though, wanted to avoid this due to what is now referred to as Anakin Skywalker is an incredibly unpleasant and annoying character in The Phantom Menace. George's, though, initial idea from the 80s, when he still planned to make more Star Wars films right after Return of the Jedi, was to have Luke building the Jedi Order in Episode 7, and then have his twin sister appear, who turned out not to be Princess Leia, but a brand new character in 8. The Emperor would then show up in Episode 9, having been in hiding on the other side of the galaxy, which is very kinda Snoke-esque, or whatever, the backstory of that character is. This was obviously shelved before the majority of the story beats for Return of the Jedi were decided upon. Lucas's modern version, though, has been described as more ethereal, ambitious, and more of a family tale. Before J.J. Abrams was brought on board for The Force Awakens, there was one piece of known concept art that Lucas approved in the very early development meetings. It's this piece by James Klein of an ancient bell-shaped Jedi temple that George Lucas gave the Fabuloso stamp. Every now and then, even to this day, apparently he'll still call Kathy Kennedy and be like, right, okay, so this is what the Jedi are about. Here's some more details about the Jedi Order and whatever. But who knows how much of that actually filters through. There's also been much made of Mark Hamill's disparaging remarks about The Last Jedi.
I almost had to think of Luke as another character. Maybe he's Jake Skywalker. He's not my Luke Skywalker.
Well, less disparaging and more, that wasn't really the Luke Skywalker that he had in mind. He actually crafted his own tragic backstory for the character, going into 8, so he could get his head into the dark place he needed to benefit the narrative. One such story involved him leaving the Jedi Order to raise a family and marry. However, his kid gets hold of his lightsaber and accidentally kills himself, which is like an allegory for gun violence in the home. Hamill is quick, though, to acknowledge that this is really just for him and is not officially what happened by any stretch. Mark Hamill, though, has also said that he wishes that there'd been more acceptance of Lucas's guidelines and advice. He actually knows George Lucas's outline for episodes 7, 8, and 9, and apparently they are vastly different than what we've been getting. But again, he acknowledges that he doesn't want to be a stick in the mud, and he considers these new films this current generation's Star Wars. Also, this is a nice little thing to end on. Mark Hamill also had his own ideas for the direction of Luke Skywalker in Return of the Jedi. That's also very different from what we've got. Take a look at this discussion from 2005.
Obviously in Sith he goes full bore to the dark side. Yeah. And you and I talked about this once. Do you sit there going man, in Return of the Jedi, that should have been me. I should have been the dude.
I pitched that to George.
Did you really?
Yeah.
So did you want to, in the last one, in Jedi, just go nuts?
No, as an actor, that would be more fun to play. I just thought that's the way it was going. From when we finished 2, I figured that's what will be the pivotal moment. I'll have to come back, but it'll be I'll have Han Solo in my crosshairs, and I'll be about to kill him, or about to kill the princess, or about to kill somebody that we care about. And, it'll be, it's an old cornball movie, like World War II movies and stuff. And I was the one that said to George, because I live in Japan, I said I should come back having been trained somewhere with shaved widow's peak and a top knot, like a braid. He said, no, I want your hair to look exactly like it did in the other 2. Then of course, what do I see?
Anakin Skywalker got himself a braid, looking a little Asian and whatnot.
But he drives you crazy.
Is there anything, though, that you'd like to have seen included in The Last Jedi that was mentioned here? Perhaps an idea of George Lucas's, or something else that was scrapped? Or, I'd love to hear your own ideas of how you wanted Episode 8 to go. Because look, a lot of people have a lot to say about this film, which is absolutely fine. That's great. But just, if you could be nice to each other, that'd be super great. Also, subscribe if you want to see videos here every week. I release one every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. And every Monday, there's an episode of my podcast called The Weekly Planet, where we talk movies and comics and TV shows. This coming episode is on the best and worst films of 2017. That's all linked below if you can. But thanks for watching this. I appreciate it. Take care.